My name is Bob Baer. I used to be a CIA agent stationed in Lebanon during the Civil War. It was chaos. But the real threat was always car bombs. And now we know you can kill a president, defeat a superpower, or just blow up your own government with a car bomb. All you need is roads, traffic. Every airport, any government building, or a street is a target. This is the film of how the century of the car turned into the century of the car bomb. How a dream of freedom turned nightmare. For 50 years, we were all told that nuclear weapons were the real threat. But that's a lie. The real terrorist threat has always been the car bomb. Crude and unstoppable. From America to the Middle East to Ireland and Europe, it has shaped the river of 20th century conflict. But until now, the car bomb's secret history has never been told. Who invented it, who developed it, and who killed with it. I've come back to the one city where car bombs have forever shaped our history. Beirut. There was always the car bomb. People were dying every day by car bombs, and we were the target. And the only way not to be targeted was to change your route. You were a fool if you went down the same road every day at the same time. Because all it took was a stolen car, a couple $100 of explosives, and you were dead. It was complete chaos, anarchy here. There's no way to protect against it. We changed our cars daily, changed the color of them. I use taxis all the time. When we bought the taxi, it was green, but we kept on changing the color. When I drove a taxi, I actually picked up passengers. And of course, they're absolutely astounded to meet an American driving a taxi during the Civil War. I mean, any city there is can be taken hostage by the car bomb. When I came to Beirut, when I was assigned here, the station had a 60% casualty rate. Half of those people killed or wounded were from car bombs. Yeah, we were terrified of them. After a time, you even got used to the mayhem. I loved Beirut. The women. The rush. It was a great place to be a spy. And then the embassy got hit by a suicide car bomber. 63 dead. Dead Americans, dead Lebanese. 6 of my close colleagues, friends, and the CIA were killed. Karsten Tvedt saw the bomb go off.
And suddenly I saw this big bang, this white star covering the whole embassy. And then, of course, the bang. And then when I looked up, flames. And I run over, and there I saw death and destruction and chaos. Dead people in the streets, arms, torsos, and it was just grotesque.
It was a stunning assault. One man with a car could wage war on the United States, ironically, with an American truck. Here is where the suicide bomber stopped his pickup truck, a GMC. He waited for another car to come this way to signal him that the driveway was clear. And as soon as the Mercedes came, he took off. He drove very slowly. I mean, here's a kid that is about ready to die. Slowly, unnoticeable. You had American troops patrolling the Corniche. I mean, what could they tell in traffic like this? Nothing. By now, he knew that the embassy entrance was open, and indeed it was. I mean, it was good intelligence. He came through here, and you see this building here, of course, wasn't there, and he headed directly the wrong way under the portico bounced up through the lobby, and it exploded immediately. Everybody was killed. There was blood all over. It was a mess. I kept having the same dream. Sitting in the CIA office on the 4th floor, drinking coffee. The windows bursting in, doors, ceilings, everything falling around you. I could never leave the embassy car bombing alone. There is one man who knows a lot about Lebanese car bombs. Mahmoud Khashab, a top expert who defused dozens of bombs. Christian car bombs, Palestinian car bombs, Muslim car bombs, in the long drawn-out civil war.
Back then, I was the only expert who was dismantling car bombs in Lebanon.
ليش اللبنانيين عندهم خبرة أفضل من الدنيا بسيارات مفخخة؟
Because we have seen a lot of war. I was only 13 years old when I experienced the war in Lebanon. I lived through the war and the destruction. Even to this day, I am still living the troubles in Lebanon.
Khashab became too good at stopping car bombs, and then his adversaries decided to target him.
One day they left a bomb especially for me. It was activated by remote control, and as soon as I touched the bomb, they blew it up.
And depending on your enemies, Beirut is still a very dangerous city. On February 14, 2005, the former Lebanese Prime Minister, Rafiq Hariri's presidential cavalcade was destroyed by a 2-ton car bomb. A CCTV camera captured the bomb vehicle, this white truck, loitering in the traffic. As Hariri's black Mercedes drew alongside, the bomb went off. Hariri was one of the world's richest men, a billionaire. His Mercedes was armored to the hilt, V6, the best protection level there is. But his assassination was, as these things go, a perfect hit. If you can kill Hariri, you can kill any man on earth with a car bomb. Truly, Beirut is the home of the modern car bomb. The car bombs we're seeing today in Iraq were developed on these streets.
A suicide car bomb fell to breach a police checkpoint in East Baghdad. The explosion killed around 20 civilians and 6 police officers.
At the beginning of the war in Iraq, we saw dozens of Lebanese crossing the border into Syria and into Iraq. And it was only a matter of time before car bombs started going off.
So we gotta push out these vehicles.
Car bombing might have become a Lebanese national custom, but the Lebanese never created the car bomb. Like a lot of other things in the 20th century, car bombs are an American invention. By the 1920s, New York had become the financial center of world capitalism. But then, in September 1920, Wall Street was rocked by a massive explosion. It was the world's first car bomb.
Where we're walking right now is exactly where, if you'd been standing here on September 16th, 1920, you would have been hit by the bomb. Over here, what was then the U.S. Sub-Treasury, and of course the stock exchange with the big flags on it there, same buildings that would have been here, and most famously, the Morgan Bank. And that really was, and in some ways still is, just the epicenter of American capitalism and government.
Tell me what happened here.
At about 12:01, a wagon, horse-drawn wagon, exploded into the lunchtime crowd. And it killed about 40 people in the street and injured hundreds of people.
So the wagon sat here. Was there anything peculiar about it?
The wagon blows up, and of course, then you begin to try to put the pieces back together. And the thing that they saw was that nobody actually really noticed it, right? You know, having an old wagon around a peddler's cart just wasn't very unusual. So you had the wagon, the bomb inside, the dynamite packed with these metal window slugs, you know, a fairly heavy device there.
Inside the wagon, the bomber packed the window weights around his dynamite to create shrapnel, naked killing power. The bomb would have blasted the metal slugs out like a machine gun, tearing through flesh and bone. This is the shrapnel left from the bomb.
It is. This is where those window slugs would have come up, would have hit this building here.
So it's fairly sophisticated. I mean, whoever built this thing knew what they were doing.
They knew what they were doing, and of course the question immediately became, who was that person, or who were those people? And the best theory is that it was a man named Mario Buda, who was an Italian anarchist. Buda was a lone operator, and he was, even within this circle of kind of militant anarchists, very committed revolutionaries, he was the committed of the committed.
Well, what did he want, though? I mean, was there anything that give us an idea what these guys wanted?
There was a flyer found in a mailbox nearby, a couple of blocks up that way, that said, "Free the political prisoners, or it will be death to all of you." And it was signed the American Anarchist Fighters.
The political prisoners were two Italian anarchists, Sacco and Vanzetti, who had been arrested and later executed by the federal government after an abortive bank robbery. It was a notorious case. Critics claimed it was a show trial. Buda was a close associate of both men.
So the idea was that this had been somehow a blow against capitalism, the idea of Wall Street, the idea of banks, a big moment of labor warfare, a revolution. You just had the Bolshevik Revolution. So that whole system of capitalism, government put together was what they were striking a blow at.
This was the first car bomb, right?
It was the first car bomb. Now, of course, it's not a car, right, in this sense, but it was a wagon bomb. This was the first time that you had the wagon left there and just timed to go off in the middle of a big urban crowd. That was something almost wholly new, and obviously is something that's continued since.
It was invented right here in Wall Street.
Yep.
What happened to Buda?
Buda actually fled the United States. He went back to Italy, but he never came back to the States as far as anyone knows.
Buda's wagon was the world's first VBAD, vehicle-borne improvised explosive device, but also the start of the forensic counterattack against car bombers. Using tiny letters found embossed on the horse's metal shoes, investigators, after visiting 5,000 stables, traced the horseshoes to a local Italian blacksmith and obtained a sketchy description of the cart's driver. The trail ran cold, but the same investigative technique, using vehicle identification numbers to catch bomb planters, would prove crucial in later terrorist attacks. The FBI file on the 1920 Wall Street bombing is still open. Buda's bomb was crude: 80 pounds of TNT, 500 pounds of scrap metal, and a fuse. Car bombs are lethal because they are so easy to make. The CIA taught me how to make car bombs. The Wall Street explosion was not just the first car bomb. It was a terrorist blueprint. Car bombs have their limitations. You can't drive a car bomb through trenches, front lines. You need open roads, traffic. And the car bomb would next appear in the Middle East, in Palestine, in the violent struggle over the founding of the State of Israel. In the 1940s, Palestine was under British rule. The majority Arab population were opposed to a Jewish state. At the same time, extremist Jewish factions like the Stern Gang waged a terrorist campaign against those who they saw as enemies of the future Jewish state, Arabs and British troops. Stern's organization, Lehi, freedom fighters of Israel, were determined to drive Arabs out by terror from what Lehi saw as their rightful Jewish homeland. I met up with two of Lehi's old fighters and bomb makers. Who started the first car bombing here?
In the Syria it was.
Whose decision was that?
The operations department, they decided what targets. It was the headquarters of the Arab fighting forces.
Lehi were opposed to any deal with the Arabs by the mainstream Jewish leadership, led by David Ben-Gurion. And planning car bombs was a shortcut to provoking all-out war. On January the 4th, 1948, Lehi struck. Their target was the Syriana building in the heart of Jaffa, a densely populated Arab district. Disguised as Arabs, a Lehi bomb team drove a truck packed with 200 pounds of explosives and parked close to the building. The electric timer was set for 80 seconds to let the bombers get away. The explosion killed 28, including innocent passers-by, and injured hundreds. What are the advantages of a car bomb?
Heavy loads. If you want to move a ton, you use a car. If you want to move a hand grenade, you move it in your pocket. You couldn't get a weapon, a big amount of explosives near the Syriana building unless you had a transportation that can bring it, and then to start, ignite it, and all the delay fuses.
How many people were killed in the Syriana?
We killed only people who were directly involved in the fighting against the Jewish will to establish an independent country. We never wanted to kill children or innocent people or civilian people. It happened by bad luck. You can't avoid it.
Lehi did not have a monopoly on planning car bombs. The Palestinians made plans to strike back using their own bomb maker, Fawzi al-Qutb, trained by the Nazis during World War II. Fawzi's sister, Nadira al-Qutb, was close to him. She has never spoken about her brother before.
كيف كان التدريب بألمانيا؟
يطلق عليها
It was called commando.
Yes. فيها
It
لاسلكي
included wireless devices,
واتصالات
communications,
والتدريب
and
على
all
جميع
types of
أنواع
explosives.
المتفجرات.
6 weeks after Syriana, Fawzi targeted a Jewish stronghold, Ben Yehuda Street, in the heart of Jerusalem.
مثلا شارع بن
Take
يهوذا
Ben Yehuda
بأكمله.
Street.
وكان مسؤول عن
هو المسؤول.
He was
هو
in
مسؤول.
هو
He
الرتاب
planned bombs at the
حط في
beginning,
أول
the
الشارع في
middle,
وسط
and
الشارع
the
في
end
نهاية
of the street.
الشارع. هو من طبيعته
It was
فوزي
Fawzi's
في
nature.
عنده شيء إنه هو
He was
ذكي
very
جدا.
intelligent.
هو يخطط. هو
And as he
يراقب.
prepared
هو يختار
explosives,
الموقع.
he was looking to see
بعدين يحضر
if he could do it
المواد. إذا
himself.
استطاع هو أن يقوم فيها.
But Jerusalem, in 1948, was an armed camp. Jewish areas protected by checkpoints and rifle-bearing guards. The only way through was to disguise the bomb vehicles as a British military convoy. And the men driving those trucks were 6 British Army deserters.
وشو رأيك عن البريطانيين؟ كان اثنين في بني يهودا جنود.
هو
The ones that worked with him?
اللي اشتغلوا معه.
نعم.
كان مش بس اثنين، كان عنده عدد
They were not
كبير
just
من
two.
البريطانيين.
There was a big number of
اللي
British
كانوا
soldiers who were
ضد
working with
السياسة
him.
البريطانية اللي
They were
إنه
against the
كيف
British
يعطوا
policy.
بالفلور، كيف ليش
Why
يقيموا
throw
شعب
people
من
from their land
الأرض
and replace
ويحطوا
them
شعب
with other
ثاني.
people?
فهدول الجماعة كان هو
Fauzi
يستقطبهم
used to plan missions with them
ويعمل
and they
معاهم
used to carry it out.
ترتيبات وهم ينفذوا.
Parking the truck bombs close to two hotels, being used as barracks by Jewish fighters, the deserters shot a security guard and then fled. Tell me what happened that morning.
I was on the fourth floor, and all at once I heard two shots. I saw a small truck, and it was foaming. It was smoking. I knew that's a fuse or explosion. I rushed back and I told him, get up, because it's going to be exploded. We went into the staircase. We waited for the blast. All at once, everything was covered with dust, and I couldn't see my friend who was standing just opposite me.
The 3,000-pound bombs tore through the surrounding buildings, killing 60.
Jerusalem's main Jewish business thoroughfare, Ben Yehuda Street, is a heap of smoking rubble, and rescue work is carried out by all men of goodwill, British, Arab and Jew.
كان مسموح يعني مدنيين كان في بني يهودا مزبوط؟
هقول بالنسبة للمدنيين، بالنسبة
Let me talk about the
الدولة اليهودية أو
the Zionist state, whatever you want to call it.
كان كل شعب
Every
فيهم
inhabitant of this state was
ومجهز
trained and ready.
يقوم في أعمال.
Every
كل
house
بيت
had weapons.
كان يكون فيه سلاح.
Whereas the
كل بيت. بينما
Palestinians
الشعب الفلسطيني ولا بيت
didn't have a
عنده
single
برودة.
gun between them.
فوين
So
ما بده
Fauzi
يقتلهم هو
considered
بيعتبرهم
every
إنهم
Israeli to
جنود
be soldiers.
لأنهم هدول جنود. بعدين هدول
After
هم
all,
اللي
it was
أجوا
they who
من
came,
الهجرة
became as
لياخذوا
refugees to take his
أرضه
land.
ياخذوا بلده.
So I believe he had the
فهو
right to
بالتالي
blow up the
يعني
street.
أنا بتصور إنه عنده الحق إنه ينسف هذا الشارع.
Hannah was not just an eyewitness. She was also a Lehi member and had taken part in bombing operations. Well, let me ask you this question. Did the truck bomb make you quit the resistance?
No, why?
Did it make you angrier?
Sure, it made me angry, but why should I leave when English people put car bombs here and kill civilians? We carried out the war against those who were guilty, the leaders.
Lehi were the first terrorist group in the world to use car bombs, but they would not be the last.
كيف كان رأيه يعني السيارة مفخخة يعني فعال؟
هي ما كانش لم تكن
They were
اسمها
not referred
سيارة
to as car
مفخخة.
bombs. They were considered an operation.
كانوا يعتبروها عملية.
A commando
هي عملية
operation.
فدائية وعملية
An operation
نضالية.
for the struggle.
يحطوا السيارة
They
فيها
used to put bombs in a car and
ويفجروها
explode the car
في
in
الأماكن
enemy
اللي
territory.
بيحسوها إنه هي أكثر خطراً عليهم.
First the Jews, then the Arabs. The world's first car bomb war. Lehi planted 4, and Fauzi planted 4. 120 people died. The car bombing only stopped in May 1948, when war broke out, and the checkpoints became front lines. A new terror weapon, cheap and convenient, had been born. In war, it's always easier to kill if every one of the enemy is guilty. You park the car on the target and walk away. You censor out your own atrocity. The casual innocent smashed to pieces. You're unrecognizable to yourself. In my time in the CIA, I heard a lot of people talk that way. The same patterns of lies would recur whenever car bombs appeared on streets. But Palestine in 1948 did produce one further novelty, the car bomb as a key assassination weapon, when Al-Qutb tried to blow up the Jewish political leadership.
What happened in this building here?
Well, here was the government of the Jews. And in the second floor here was the chamber of the founding father of the State of Israel, David Ben-Gurion. That Arabs wanted to kill him. And they believed that if they would kill him, Jews will not establish their state. The specialist of the Arabs, Fawzi al-Kutub, prepare all the explosion, and the car was exploded here.
How many people were killed?
Well, 7 people were killed and 100 wounded.
What would have happened if Ben-Gurion had been in his office?
If Ben-Gurion would be killed, the Jews wouldn't establish their state, because he was only a prime minister or a leader, but he was, as you can say, George Washington.
George Washington of the Jews,
in the United States.
Assassinating your enemy's supreme leader is nothing new. Think of President Abraham Lincoln. What was new was the car bomb. Parked in the right place, packed with enough explosives, you can target any man on earth. Kings and presidents have to drive the roads, just like the rest of us. And the moment you do, you're vulnerable. You don't even need to be a freedom fighter to plant a car bomb. Car bombs are so easy, you can use them purely for business, if your business is controlling the world's heroin supply. In the early 60s, the Sicilian Mafia discovered a new way to make rival mafiosi disappear by booby-trapping their cars and blowing them to pieces. In Sicily, the power of the Mafia is as old as the statues. 5 million people live here. But hidden amongst them is an estimated 7,000 Mafia members. Yet the power of the Cosa Nostra, our thing, is felt everywhere, from the highest political office right down to the smallest market stall.
In this market, is there mafia here?
Yeah, mafia is everywhere. Che cosa è? Un documentario inglese. Loro vogliono sapere che cos'è la mafia, come funziona. Non siamo sempre al solito. I asked him what mafia is.
Can I visit their office?
La mafia vedere I punti dove doesn't work in this way. The mafia is in the government, in the state.
If I open up a business in Palermo as an American, do I have to pay money to the mafia?
Vuole che le dica, dice, se lui è americano, se lui viene qua a Palermo e apre un ufficio, apre un'attività, deve pagare alla mafia? Non che io sono incluso nella mafia, ti posso dire. He says that he cannot know, he cannot answer.
But what if I want to join?
Lui dice, se io ne voglio incontrare uno, che fa? È difficile questa domanda. It's very difficult, the question.
Thank you. So they don't even want to talk about it.
Yeah, they're scared. Actually, they're scared.
So, but how do you know the mafia is here?
Because to work, you need to ask the mafia the permission. Because person who works here had to pay to remain here.
And if I don't pay, what would they say in Italian if they came to you?
Giovedì mi devi dare questi soldi, se no ti rompo le gambe.
What does that mean?
It means until this day you have to give me that money or I break your leg or something like that.
Another traditional mafia business technique is just the old-fashioned whack job. Shooting your rival mafioso in his favorite cafe. Things started to change in 1957 when the Sicilian and American Mafia met in this lavish Palermo hotel, organized the world heroin trade. But business did not run smooth. In 1963, the first mafia war broke out between two clans, the Grecos and the Barberas.
That's your mother?
Giovanni Impastato is an anti-mafia campaigner, but he is also the nephew of a key mafia boss, Cesare Manthella. Manthella was an ally of the Grecos and the first mafioso to be assassinated with a car bomb.
Dunque Cesare Manzella, mio zio,
My uncle, Cesare Manzella, was a different kind of mafioso. He was a very kind person and always available.
Molto gentile.
But he was a mafioso, wasn't he? And didn't he have to kill people himself?
Lui era un mafioso.
He was a mafioso. And to maintain respect, he clearly had to order murders himself.
Chiaramente è stato anche lui mandante di alcuni delitti.
How many people do you think your uncle killed?
Sicuramente quel delitto che è avvenuto a
Almost certainly he ordered a double murder that happened in Cinisi, as well as many others. There never has been a mafioso who did not kill.
Che non uccide.
Tell me what you saw when you saw your uncle, the car bombing.
Io ho sentito il boato,
I was at home when I heard the blast, and I went with my brother Peppino to the site where the explosion happened.
Sul posto lì dove è avvenuto il fatto. Che
it was a villa in the countryside.
Di campagna. Niente, appena siamo arrivati lì, abbiamo trovato uno scempio totale. In pratica la macchina era ridotta a pezzettini, non esistevano i corpi perché con l'esplosione si erano ridotti in brandelli, sparsi un po' in tutto il giardino.
Tell me about the mechanism.
La macchina era proprio lì al passaggio, lui doveva passare per entrare nella villa e c'era questa macchina che era la stessa macchina, lo stesso tipo di un amico suo che era Gaetano Badalamenti. Lui pensava fosse l'amico suo Tano. Scende dalla macchina, appena gira le chiavi e accende il motore, avviene lo scoppio.
Manthella's assassination was what we call in the trade a come-on job. Manthella, thinking he was just moving a car, opened the door, turned the ignition on, and blew himself up. Booby-trapping an enemy's car would soon become a favorite killing method for assassins everywhere.
Why did they not, when they killed your uncle, use a pistol instead of a car bomb?
Il delitto di mio zio che è stato il primo in assoluto, la prima autobomba, la prima azione terroristica, in questo delitto hanno voluto marcare la propria vendetta.
But the Mafia's next car bombing went disastrously wrong. Giuseppe Monteperto, a crime reporter, was one of the first eyewitnesses.
Quando sono arrivato la prima volta ho visto soltanto
As soon as I arrived, I saw the car which was
questa
still
macchina
burning.
ancora che fumava, che era uno scempio
It was a
totale,
complete wreck.
perché non rimase un corpo intatto, erano tutti pezzi. La Giulietta bloccava,
The
come
car,
vedete, questo
a
vialetto,
Giulietta, was blocking the path.
per cui da qui la
Somebody called
telefonata
the police about it, saying
in
there is a
questura e ai
suspicious car
carabinieri
blocking
per
the
dire
path.
c'è una macchina
Be
sospetta
careful.
che ostruisce il passaggio, state attenti. Carabinieri della
Policemen
caserma
arrived
Carini
from the
e
Carini
agenti della
barracks.
squadra mobile cominciarono
They
a
started to
gironzolare
examine
attorno
the
a
car.
questa macchina, per cui
At that
tentarono
time,
di aprire,
the
perché
mafia
all'epoca
used to
li
leave their
facevano
victims
trovare
bound up
incaprettati
inside
dentro
the
i
boot of
portabagagli della macchina. Ecco
And
perché
that's why
andarono
they tried to
per
open
tentare
it.
di aprire. Per
Then
quell'istante
there
ci
was
fu
a
una
terrible
deflagrazione
explosion.
terribile. Volarono tutti per aria.
Arms and legs were in the
Gambe e
trees.
braccia sugli alberi,
They were all
dappertutto, polverizzati.
7 policemen were killed, provoking a massive Italian state crackdown. Within weeks, 1,200 Mafia soldiers were arrested and the Mafia leaders detained.
Why did the Italian Mafia use car bombs?
L'autobomba
The
dà
car bomb
dimostrazione
is
di
a
potenza,
demonstration
una
of power,
dimostrazione
of
di una
devastating
forza
strength.
devastatrice.
I understand showing the power, but doesn't that cause more problems than it's worth?
Questo è un problema che
This
ha
is a
riguardato
problem that has always been connected with Cosa
Ogni
Nostra.
volta che la mafia ha
Every
alzato
time the
il
mafia
suo
raised its
livello
level of
di violenza,
violence,
sia
it drew more
all'interno
attention to
sia nei
itself from
confronti
the eyes of the
delle
state.
istituzioni, vi è stata
This
una
is a
maggiore
repetitive
attenzione da
cycle
parte dello
that has
Stato.
always
È un
occurred
ciclo e
in Cosa
riciclo
Nostra.
che dentro Cosa Nostra c'è stato sempre.
So, in other words, the car bomb is bad for business.
After Ciaculli, the Mafia stopped using car bombs for 17 years, until a new, more ruthless generation of Mafia leaders took over and used car bombs to assassinate judges and magistrates. But every judge they blew up turned the heat on. More arrests, trials, prison.
Cosa Nostra una
Cosa Nostra
visione
sometimes
alcune
has a very
volte
far-sighted view,
molto
and sometimes
lungimirante,
a
alcune volte
short-sighted view.
corta. È la
It's the
differenza tra
difference
due
between two
strategie
strategies.
diverse. La
The
strategia
terrorist strategy
terroristica
and a
è una
strategy of
strategia, la
submersion,
strategia di una mafia che si è
where
detto
the
della
mafia hides
sommersione,
itself to
cioè una
avoid the
mafia che si
sensationalisms
nasconde
of murders
per poter
and
fare
massacres.
patti evitando il clamore degli omicidi, evitando il clamore delle stragi.
The Mafia in Sicily had no political agenda. They were into making money. They don't need prosecutors sent from Rome. They don't need mass arrests. They don't need conspiracy trials. They want to keep everything quiet. And of course, the car bomb is the least quiet weapon there is.
But unlike the Mafia, the next car bombers wanted the blast of their homemade bomb to reverberate all the way to the White House. It was do-it-yourself terrorism. The eventual trail of destruction would span the globe, from Ireland, Oklahoma, and the Middle East. The car bomb was about to become the perfect lethal weapon. In the late 60s, students at the University of Wisconsin in the Midwest were in revolt. There were daily demonstrations, protests. Alan Thompson was an FBI special agent assigned to the state capital, Madison.
And what was it like in 1970? What were the students like? What was happening here?
Well, the students were really involved with the Vietnam War. There was demonstrations going on, and some of them were very violent. There was a lot of tear gas, a lot of broken windows.
What was the demand?
The key demand was to get out of Vietnam.
But a tiny splinter group of students saw themselves as already at war with the Nixon administration. And the nearest target was close at hand, the campus Army Math Research Center, a research lab funded by the Pentagon and housed in the Department of Physics. At 3:42 a.m. on the 24th of August, 1970, an explosion destroyed the Army Math Center.
So tell me, what did this place look like when you arrived?
The day I showed up, all these buildings across the street here, these windows were all knocked out. The buildings across the street over there were all knocked out. These windows in here were shattered. In fact, we found that there were 21 buildings damaged in some capacity.
Hundreds of FBI agents from all over the United States were sent to Wisconsin.
This was of extreme interest to the White House, wasn't it? This
Yes.
whole explosion.
Absolutely. It went all the way to the director's desk. There was daily contact with the Oval Office as to what was happening out here and why it happened, and we had to come up with some answers real fast as to what was going on.
Was anyone killed?
Yes, a young physicist by the name of Robert Fossenot was killed in the initial blast.
The FBI team immediately focused their investigation on a car spotted fleeing from the scene at high speed. The bombers were led by a 22-year-old college dropout, Carl Armstrong.
This is was the route? You came up from the YMCA.
Armstrong agreed for the first time to return to the building and talk about the night he bombed Wisconsin.
Where did the idea come from of a car bomb?
My brother Dwight and I were like, basically, we're considering ways to bomb the Army Math Research Center, and we considered, there's steam tunnels that go all through the campus, and we could have brought explosives in through the steam tunnel. And we thought, well, because we needed, to bring like almost a ton of explosives. And my brother Dwight says, well, why don't we just fill up a truck full of explosives and just set it off outside the building? And my immediate reaction was, that's crazy. And then I thought, well, that's probably the best way to do it.
The Armstrong brothers stumbled upon the ultimate terrorist weapon of the 20th century. But there was another deadly twist. They bought the base materials for their explosives in the local hardware store.
First of all, we bought the materials from a farmer's co-op, ammonium nitrate and fuel oil. And then we transported it to our prep site, which was a farmer's field. And basically we just put, the ammonium nitrate in the barrels.
Did you mix it by hand?
Oh no, we just poured it into the barrel. And then when, it came time that night is when we added fuel oil.
The fuel oil, yeah.
Yeah.
The two basic components of the bomb were bags of ammonium nitrate agricultural fertilizer used by farmers all over the world, and diesel fuel.
How'd you get the idea? Well, you didn't have the internet.
Well, basically the formula was in the Encyclopedia Britannica.
Under what?
Explosives.
Under explosives, really?
Yes.
Did it tell you how to mix it?
Just gave the basic formula, ammonium nitrate, fuel oil, and then it needed a very strong cap or dynamite to, detonate it.
Caps are small explosive detonators used to set off the main charge. Normally their sale is tightly restricted, the military or mining.
Actually, I bought the caps.
You bought them?
Yeah.
You have to have an ID?
No. You just had to look like you're a farmer.
How much did the whole thing cost you?
$200 for the ammonium nitrate.
Carl and his 3 fellow student bombers then stole a van and mixed the explosives together. They drove to the university. Inside the van was 1.5 tons of explosives.
It was 3 o'clock in the morning, a Monday morning, and right where we were setting off the explosive, the whole room was lit up. And I got out of the van, couldn't spot anybody in the room. And, we found out later that Fosnacht had gone to the bathroom or something and had gotten killed in the hallway outside the room when the explosive went off.
Can you remember the sound of the explosion?
Yeah, I can remember it. When we drove south after the bombing, my brother pulled the car over and he said, you got to look at this. I could see this mushroom cloud 1,500 feet in the ground with fiery things being thrown up into the cloud. It just glowed red. And it was just like the sound of glass all the way down University falling into the street.
You know what it almost sounds like? It almost sounds like a college prank.
I wish that's all it was.
No. You were committed.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was not a college prank.
Okay, are you proud of what you did in 1970?
Well, I'm ashamed that, Robert Fosnacht died and people were injured. But I had no regrets for my motivations for doing the bombing and doing the bombing. It was the message that we were trying to send, to the government.
After the bombing, Armstrong fled to Canada and was a fugitive for 2 years, but was then extradited back to Wisconsin. His trial was a cause célèbre for many in the anti-war movement. He served 10 years in prison.
sad part about it is that the research that they claim that the Army Math Research Center was doing was not research for the Army at all. Bob Forstenotte, in his area, was superconductivity and in metals, and it had no bearing on the Vietnam War at all.
So in other words, this is an act of protest that turned into an act of murder.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Counterproductive.
It was counterproductive here in Madison and probably throughout the United States. I believe it scared everybody so bad because it was such a huge explosion. And people realized if you persisted in that type of damage, a lot more people could get killed.
After Fastnack's death, student numbers at Vietnam War protests fell. There were no more bombings.
You know, the significance of this is you can take a group of amateurs with almost no money. We're talking about $100, a stolen car, fertilizer. So it was, in a sense, it was a turning point.
Absolutely, absolutely. You could go to any gas station that now sells diesel fuel, purchase that. You can go to any farm outlet store, get your fertilizer, just mix the formula correctly, and have initiated to set it off, and that's it. Done.
Basically, $100, you can shake a country.
Exactly.
In the same year as Armstrong's bomb, Northern Ireland slid into civil war. The IRA would plant hundreds of car bombs. And like Armstrong, the explosives came from farmers' fertilizer, ammonium nitrate. Their supply was inexhaustible.
It's a massive bomb. Ring the police. Massive. I repeat, massive. You have the message. Goodbye.
In the next episode, we see how car bombs changed the face of human conflict across the world. And I will find out if there is any way to stop the deadliest weapon of the 21st century, car bomb.